is okay. I've got that. Is Pat there?
Yeah, Pat's there and Anne's there. Beth's not here, but I'm not sure what's going on with her because we haven't seen her for a while.
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, but someone should chase her up, really.
I have. I've tried. I've sent
Right.
an email. I'm just gonna look at the book as well. And we're just nearly ready to hand over. And good. Hang on. Oh, that'll be absolutely fantastic. Right. Pat, is Pat there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pat, we're on a new schedule, so can you bung over some shekels for another 8, please?
Okay.
It's £32.
Okay.
If you could bang over 32, because we're on a new schedule. So Anne's just started. So we're on a new batch of 8. So I thought I'd let you know, Pat. Okay.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do, I'm gonna try just do your chatting and whatever. I'm just gonna
Maybe Richard isn't coming. Maybe he's. Oh, I'm just wondering.
shut up. Anyway, no, you have a quick chat, and I'm just gonna let Jessica have a bit of control, and then I will just give me a moment to see if I can track him down. Okay, I'll be back in. So
No, all right. Just let Jess start.
Jess, over to you anyway, and I'll just probably I'll just go out and I'll come back in. Okay, see if I can get him.
No, that's fine. Hi everyone. Well, Anne and Pat.
Hello. Hello.
How are you both?
Okay.
Okay, I had my 4th vaccine yesterday.
Oh wow! Already they're doing the 4.
It was my booster, yeah. So I had 3 vaccines and then a booster, but this one I had a really bad reaction. I was shivering and really, you know. But she said it was just it just meant it was working, you know.
Yeah.
The bodies were coming, you know, to play. Well, I hope so. Anyway, maybe they weren't working in the other ones.
It seems to be getting worse each one that you have.
It certainly was. Yeah, I felt terrible. I felt sick as well, you know.
Oh no,
But,
that sounds awful.
But you know, it's maybe just the way, you know, just me, the way I reacted, you know. That was the mob before, you know, the mob. What was it? The American one.
Oh, Moderna.
Yeah, Moderna.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see the starting of the end. I think with all of this, from things that I'm seeing. So I think that's encouraging, and hopefully this encourages more people to come to classes as well. And because I know that was a lot of fear for many people.
Yeah.
But I'm glad she's doing well. Anne, have you got any news, archaeology wise?
I don't think you know, it's awful. Women of our age now, it's our memory, isn't it? We should write it down, really, because I've been following this series on shipwrecks, you know, and you know, it's just been very interesting, and you just didn't realise how dependent, how dangerous it was, and how dependent we were on the maritime, you know. The sea, you know. Well, we still are, but we've got aeroplanes now, and it was something like 45 ships went into harbour in this storm in Bridlington, and they were coal ships, and they all got smashed to smithereens, you know, in 18 something, you know, these big galleons, you know. And well, coal boats they were, and it's just that was the only historic thing, I think. But I have been watching on Facebook and stuff.
There hasn't been anything new, I think, that's jumped out this week.
Not very remarkable this week, but you know.
I think everyone's got to go back and analyse things, and I'm sure there's other things in the in the background going on that'll soon come up. So
Yeah.
I think with archaeology, I think it's like politics. Is a quote that I learned when I done A-level. It was basically a week is a long time in politics because so much goes on, and I think the same goes for archaeology.
Yeah.
And definitely a week has been a long time in politics, I think, for Britain this week as well. But we won't go on to that conversation. But thank you, Anne. Pat, any news from you?
Nope.
No, that's fine. I'll get stuck into it. Carl's left by the looks of it, so I'll just carry on, and you can join when he's ready to. Today's a bit of a miss. It's a mashup of loads of things. Things that have come to my attention. And next week I was thinking of looking at Anglo-Saxons in Wales and the archaeology with that. So I think it's important to obviously look at the little things, because you might not be able to put a full lecture on just one thing. So looking at little things, and you can just build it up from there. There is a few things in there that are quite big, but I didn't want to delve too much into them because I've got a funny feeling that Carl might touch upon them in our main classes. But we will delve into them, basic overview really. And I just want to argue that Wales has a rich history, rich archaeology, and some of the things that I find out about Wales, I just think, why isn't there much attention to Wales? Because there seems to be so much well-preserved archaeology that can tell us so much, and it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And we'll be looking at something in particular that's in the British Museum, and recently there's been calls to bring it back to Wales, so we'll be discussing that as well. But I just think Welsh archaeology has been unique and very important, with what we're going to look at in the other lectures that we do on Thursdays or Tuesdays for you, Pat, at the moment. We will see how the Gower comes into play with the story of prehistory in Wales and in Britain. And I think throughout time, there's been this important characteristic that has stayed with Welsh archaeology, that's been able to tell us a different side or something new to our history. And one thing that comes into play with a lot of these things is how there's myths and legends, and they've come together, adding to the history and the archaeology, adding history to the archaeology, because the purpose and the stories of these monuments and sites have changed over time to give us a sense of magic. And to me, I think this is something in us, that we know that there's special areas, something significant to our past that we do not know anymore, but we still feel some sort of connection to it, like our ancestors. And so that's why we have these stories to them, I think, just so we can try and understand the magic in our own sense. And I just think a lot of looking at some of these sites, how King Arthur comes into play with a lot of these sites, and how that sometimes overshadows the history of the archaeology. So what we'll do, we'll get into the first site, which is Arthur's Table, which Oh yeah, go on, Colin.
Yeah, Richard can't join us tonight. He's had to go to hospital, so
oh no.
It should be okay. He's just had a bit of a funny turn, that's all.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, tell him that we're thinking of him, Carl.
Yeah.
Arthur's Table will be a site that we'll be visiting when you come down this end. So anyway, I'm going to let you go. Best of luck. I'll see you soon, guys, and best of luck with the class tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, Carl.
Bye-bye, guys.
This is exactly what I said about Ireland. You know, they're very on the ball with their myths and legends, you know, and showing them with the site, you know, connected to the site. So that's fantastic to hear more about Wales, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that Wales is following suit. I think Wales, the direction that Wales goes into, it almost follows Ireland and Scotland in some sort of sense, even down to politics, for example. One example I can think of is when Scotland voted for devolution. Before that happened, Wales had a vote and they said no, and then they had another vote after Scotland said yes, and Wales was more happy to do it. And I think Wales likes to they want to do the same. They want to see it work first, and I think Wales just sometimes has that inspiration. I think seeing what other countries can do like that, that's very closely related to Wales in some sort of sense, encourages people to take that on with Wales. And I think this is what I'm liking. I was talking to 2 undergraduate students on my train home from Bridgend a few weeks ago, talking archaeology, and we ended up talking. And one's from Lampeter University. She was the one studying archaeology. The other one was doing geology in Durham University. But it was a nice conversation that I had with them. And the girl from Lampeter said that her main focus is Welsh archaeology. And you start to see that there's more of an interest in that. When I was doing my master's, there was one individual who based their whole degree on different focuses in Wales. And it's nice to see that, especially when I was watching back people's presentations. I was learning as well. There was things sometimes that there's so much that you can see. Sometimes you can be very tunnel vision on the niche that you like, and when someone shows you their niche in terms of Welsh history, you think, oh, I never really thought to look at Welsh history like that. So I like the fact that we're having lots of different minds, lots of different thinking come together with all of this. It's fantastic to see. But I agree with you, Anne, it's like Ireland, and I think Ireland and Scotland help Wales bring itself up to get the attention that it deserves.
Hopefully, it's down to the universities really, to sort of encourage it and that. And we've got less probably than Ireland and Scotland. Oh no, we won't go into that. We'll just have a look at this now.
It's all right, Anne. It is an interesting conversation. Cardiff University have done a lot of modules for history students and archaeology students in Wales, and just hearing some of the things that my friends told me, because for Christmas we always buy each other books, and for birthdays, so if I've read anything that I like that I think he might like, I always get them for him and vice versa. So we're building up quite a collection of books really, and it's nice to see how I'm from Swansea, he's from Cardiff, I've known other people from Bangor and Aberystwyth, all coming together, bringing different perspectives into Welsh history. And I think it's a great place to start, I think, for anyone wanting to do a dissertation on it, because there's a lot of archaeology, there's a lot of reports, there's a lot of primary sources that are there that are discussed quite briefly, but no one's actually sat down and have really delved deep into them. And so is that gap in the historical literature and the discussion that's there for people to actually pick at. So yes, there's lots of sites that we haven't seen, but there are sites that we have seen, we have experienced, and they've just been put in archives and no one's really looked at the reports. And I think that's what I feel like when I look at the pottery kilns in medieval Wales. There's a lot of them, but not much has been brought to his discussion. So I think we're starting to see more of this, and I'm very excited to see what goes on with Wales as well. So we get to this one here. You do come up with quite a few things when you look online, but like Carl said, there's a trip in October that we're taking to West and Mid Wales. So we do our trips, obviously, in October, then some in the spring, and this is one of them. And I think it's a nice way of actually introducing Welsh archaeology to our trips and our excursions, because we've the whole time that I've done them, they've all been out of Wales and they've been fantastic. But there's also Welsh archaeology that I think we should actually get involved with and actually experience. So this will be one of the trips, and I think is something nice. Look at the way the woodlands around it, the light shining through. It just feels it's pretty, isn't it, Anne? I can imagine fairies flying about.
Yeah. I can tell.
Yeah, I can imagine myself as a child really liking this, and you can imagine if children's ever experienced this throughout time, the purpose for children for this would be a den, or even depending on what their interests in. It could be a den, or it could be somewhere to hide if you're playing tag, for example, and you don't want to be caught when you were. I don't know whether any of you would have called it this, but when you were playing tag and you had a part on the wall that if you went on there, they couldn't tag you. We used to call it Cree. I don't know where that word's come from, but we used to call it Cree. Well, you can't tap me. I'm on Cree. I'm safe at the moment. So you'd have a break and then you quickly run off it, and you had to fend for yourself. I could imagine that being used as well. So I think what I was trying to get at is that we look at the purpose of this. It can be different based on gender. It can be different based on age. And our ancestors would have used this for a very different thing. But for us, throughout time, this would have had myths and legends as part of this purpose. Children seeing this as a place for fun and games. Someone coming here for that sense of peace and sense of magic. I think that feeling that you get when you look at it, when you fall in love with that, I think that's our intuition telling us possibly that this is something from our past, and we might not understand it, but we know deep down that this is something important. So you have these freestanding stones and you have the capstone on top, and we see quite a few of them in Wales. And with things like this, what I thought was quite interesting is I bought a map. Well, my mum bought a map for me for my birthday, and it's a big map of Britain. And in Wales, you have the map, and it marks out different places that have either supernatural occurrences or myths and legends. And obviously, you have sites like this, and it's very interesting. I'm glad that I've got it, because we can definitely use it for other trips to add that sense of magic wherever we go. And this is one of the things that's on there. And you can see how even today the purpose of that for many people is to possibly try and experience another world, maybe a supernatural world. For other people, it could be a place to actually feel grounded, to feel connected maybe to the past. And for some people, this could be something that's for Instagram, for example. But when you look at this, you see how the fact that it's tucked away into woodland, it has been forgotten. So not many people go and visit this site out of chance. The stories have come here from many things, such as wolves that have once made a den here. And I'll talk about one of the stories that we have now. There is another name for it called the lair of the she-wolf. And you see how this is, this whole region is Arthurian country, where you have this part historical and largely mythical king is said to have hunted here. And the land is subbed with standing stones, burial chambers and cairns, and a natural outcrop known as Carn Arthur, a hilltop cairn called Bed Arthur, which is Arthur's grave. And 5 miles southeast of Cymru, the tomb of his dog, Megalith, the lair of the greyhound bitch. Hopefully YouTube don't come after Carl for me saying that I'm on about a dog, but it's also known as Arthur's table, and his cauldron lies in the River Taff below. So there is discussions of this. One person is Aubrey Brill, who talks about all the prehistoric sites within Britain, and she wrote a book here based on this site in 1993. But it's estimated that over 40,000 megalithic structures in Europe traces the prehistoric landscape stretching from the Iberian Peninsula to Norway. But recent studies have begun to recognise the relationship between these monuments and the local landscape. So limited dating evidence denies the construction of a solid chronology. However, the portal dolmens are considered amongst the oldest megalithic structures in Europe, if not in the world. And this portal dolmen in Wales is defined as a Neolithic structure. which is consisting of the large flat stones, that capstone on the top, and there's horizontal with 2 or more upright stones. You have those freestanding stones there, and is thought to be an enclosed burial chamber. And the whole structure itself would be covered in a mound, which with ones that we see like this today, there's no mound left, and there's nothing inside. And we will see how there are other ones closer to us that show that there was some archaeology behind it. But this is thought to be something that's important for our ancestors to connect with past loved ones and possibly remember them in a past life. And it's an echo of the past, really. Even though things can change in the purpose of his story or how people view it or the purpose, it's still very important to us. And I feel like to the human mind, we understand that. But a lot of these locations have a lot of Mesolithic activity here, where there's a lot of coastal flint scatters, which would suggest that continuing over thousands of years, these were popping up. But a lot of people have discussed where they come from. There is a quarry nearby that's discussed here as well. But this is very unique, and I think this is different from other areas that we could see in Europe. But you definitely see how this fits into his own type, that Wales has his own type of burial chambers is important to us. And this is just one of the many fantastic things that we see. So a lot of people talk about this capstone in the 19th century moving. It would move and it would turn based on different times of the year, based on how the veil of portals between the supernatural and the this world would change, and how it would turn towards the River Taff. But there's also discussions as well about how in the 19th century this was covered over by a mound, but there's little evidence of the mound today. So it's quite interesting to see what has gone on here. But the capstone points towards the River Taff and the eastern extent of the Priscilli Hills, which is now and that the view is now obscured by the mature beech trees that are on the backdrop here. But they talk about this this she-wolf, this old Welsh tale that has been put to this, and how the tales of King Arthur tells of Cerdin's cauldron and her strange concoction of herbs that were called arwen, which she brewed for a year and a day for her son. The cauldron was tended by a blind man and a little Gwan, which was, when the brew was ready, 3 drops of this landed on Gwan's thumb, and he sucked his thumb and he received inspiration. A shape-shifting chase ensures that Gwan turns into a hare, and Cerdin transforms into a greyhound in pursuit down the river. Eventually, Cerdin, as a hen, catches Gwan, and now a grain of wheat, she swallows him whole. It's quite unusual, really. It does make you think whether people in Wales were on something. They were clearly on a different land. But she was now pregnant after eating him, and she vowed to kill the child at birth. This is a very cheery story. I think it's very typical sometimes with these. I feel like Wales has a different twist to it. Sometimes there's always stories of witches or something quite gruesome, and I think that's another unique thing about Welsh myths as well, is how they're not always airy-fairy, and I quite like that as well. And I think that should be shown off more, for example, with horrible histories. That would definitely be something that was strange and really would grab the attention of children, and we could have another generation of academics that's really into Welsh history, because although horrible histories is great at looking at other things, they don't have a specific thing on Wales on the TV yet. But that's just me criticising my favourite show. I'll stop. But she vowed to kill this child, which was Gwerwan, at birth. And when the time king, he was so beautiful, she couldn't bring herself to do it, and she instead places him into the sea or in a river, depending on the version that's being heard. But when the boy is found, he's called Taliesin, which is the tale of Taliesin, which is connecting Cerridyn with Arthur, which some ask if these 5,000-year-old cromlechs could perhaps be association to the story as well. So Cerridyn had a rough deal by academics ever since the Welsh scholar Sir Ivor Williams translated the story of Taliesin's 100 years ago. He said that her name meant bent crooked, as in a witch, but when originally she was a goddess. And you have this translation that really affected how we viewed this. And I think this is why we have this scary part of it. But the scary part is resolved with her loving it. But this is thought to be something that's connected to all of this. But the translation of this was misinterpreted, and so it was rectified in 1909 by Marie Televan, who argued that Cerridyn transformed herself into a greyhound bitch in her pursuit of a little Gwerin, where these megalithic monuments were named in her honour as a canine symbol. However, I think it's important to note that this does translate to the lair of the greyhound bitch as opposed to greyhound, i.e. a breed of racing dog. A greyhound is grey and in reference to a wolf in Welsh, or more correctly considered the association with sites of Arthur, and is thought that she is a she-wolf. But this tale does connect with Arthur, with the she-wolf, and how we have this root of a boar hunt as well. It's quite interesting to see that the stories are behind this, how this is something that's in her honour, and I just think this is another purpose we give it, to give it some history and some magic as well. So I move on to the next slide, so if I can get my notes up for this, bear with me. Where did I put it? Need to clean up the way I have my notes, because I've got notes from last week still up. So this is another site. This is a sand in stone, which is in the Brecon Beacons National Park in Powys, Wales. And again, something with beautiful views. I think this is another characteristic of Wales is the beautiful views. And this is from old red sandstone, and it measures 12 foot high by 9 foot wide, and it's roughly almost diamond shaped, and is partly moss covered now today. And its age and original purpose are unknown, but it's thought to date from the Bronze Age period. It is a popular tourist attraction, but it's something that some people might not know about. But it's 30 yards off a minor road running north from the village of Ystrfelet in the Waterfall County. And this is a low heather-covered henge, 200 metres from south-west. And there is another significant standing stone in the area, which is Maen Madach, which lies off the Roman road of San Helen. But legend has it that this stone goes down to the river of the Afon Lea to drink on occasion. It's quite strange to see a stone doing that, but this tale is an allusion to the fact that this shadow is cast across the moorland as far as the river when the sun is low in the evening sky. So as people trying to find different ways of discussing this. And I think this is just definitely something that's really nice to look at, especially to go there. I think, sorry, I think there's something that's going on in the chat. I know that there's, hang on, I'll look at the chat in a minute. But there is also carvings on there that people have discussed. But again, it seems like people have, it's this lack of discussion to it that really annoys me, is the fact that you want to learn out more about this. And some people just simply just go on about the myths and just leave it at that. And I think this is why we need more people to actually discuss this. But when you look at it online, you can definitely see how, even though it's moss covered, there are some sort of pieces of evidence that there is carvings. Again, is something that I haven't been able to look at online, but this is mentioned by Kofleni, that talks about this, and it's really fantastic. I think what we're seeing here is that, again, this is something that could have possibly been used by the community nearby to mark something, to maybe be something to honour something of their beliefs, or possibly something for their family as well. And the fact that there's other standing stones in the site it makes me feel like there is a connection, really. But when you have a look at the Kofleni site, for example, they talk about how this was discussed in 1984 by David Layton, and you can access that PDF file online if it's easy to get, because I know I struggled a bit with it, which is what frustrated me. But the PDF files gives you very clear maps as well, and also tries to discuss something. But a lot of people have been talking about how they've discovered something quite unusual about this stone itself, and this was discussed on someone's blog quite recently. So a lot of people come to this site, like I said, and in the 1940s, there was discussion that there was some faint Latin or Ogham, and we've discussed Ogham before. It's this early medieval alphabet but it's inscribed. But I think, again, what the issue is when we see a lot of moss and erosion, it's gone away, and something that's quite difficult to see today. But a lot of people have discussed this as well, how it's almost like it's rediscovered because people forget. And I think this is the important thing about Welsh archaeology, is going back into the archives, maybe going back into what people have read, and try and make that accessible to everyone, so they can actually learn more and actually appreciate its history as well. But again, there's another discussion about this as well, that more history, etc., coming to more myths, sorry, not history, coming into this, is when drinking by the nightly river, this would be before the cock crows, quite early, and then at sunset, this pointed shadow creeping towards the river does resemble a tongue. I think this is what we're trying to see, is it's almost like he's going off for a drink, and then as the sun comes up, it slowly goes back. And a lot of people have talked about this as well, in terms of the shape of it and whether this means something. And some people believe that this is resembling a stone hand axe from the Neolithic period. Again, something that people think some people are reaching over, but maybe one of the discussions that I've read is that someone said, could this be a trade of one individual, and that's how they've left their mark behind in some sort of way. But it'd be quite interesting to see what more is brought out about what is said, because again, it's something that this is almost like a lack of information, and so to get these things you'd have to go online. But a lot of people talk about this. A lot of people have posed next to this photo. A lot of people have admired the inscriptions on there, and it's definitely fantastic, the stories that go behind it. Even just explaining his shadow, it's just absolutely beautiful. So if I go to the next one, if my laptop lets me. So we go to this next one. So if you just type in King Arthur's Cave, you are going to end up with one that's in England, and I wanted to look at the one that's in Wales. So this is deep in the mountains of Snowdonia in mid Wales. And a lot of people talk about this as King Arthur's Cave, King Arthur's Labyrinth, but a lot of people talk about this. So you come and go underground, almost under these caves, and it's almost like you have these tunnels, and you see this magical waterfall as well. And I think this is just a mysterious land of legends and storytelling that's been ingrained in part of Welsh history and its culture for many years. But this is something that would be quite fun to actually explore. Again, it would make you feel like you're part of his magic, but a lot of people have this association because of this myth of Arthur going into hiding. until Britain needs him again. And a lot of people have talked about this being in Hadrian's Wall, for example, how when Shepherd was knitting and his ball of wool fell into this tunnel, and he went in there and he saw King Arthur to never find that tunnel ever again. It's almost like this is a sense of it as well. And this is definitely something that's filled with magic, with the dragons and the battles and the kings, and these ancient legends have helped Wales and its culture to bring this dramatic scene and interest into early medieval history here as well. And a lot of people have talked about the scary side to it as well, how there's ghosts that hang about, but again, it's something that's quite interesting. But when you go and have a look at this, there's a lot of pride into this, and so a lot of people come here. This is hidden deep in the back of the caves, and it was unearthed in the late 19th century, and this has a wild past. There was lots of prehistoric history that was actually found here as well. I think that the history of King Arthur and the story with that is really gone into all of this, really. But you definitely see how the prehistoric evidence here is showing a different landscape and different living beings that are available to our ancestors. Some of the stuff is dating back to 30,000 years ago. There's bison, for example, there's Irish elk, great Irish elks. You see woolly rhinos and lions. It just makes you think of what the landscape would have looked like all those years ago as well. And they've even found things such as not just bones, but there was also flints found nearby. And a lot of people have discussed on whether this was evidence of people of our past living there and maybe using that area to eat. And when you have a look at later evidence of the life here, there are halves that are found on this site that are dating back to 12,120 years ago. And this is absolutely fantastic as well, because we're seeing a new way of living, how they were able to eat and their diet as well, and how this is a very important place for the life of prehistoric people in Wales. But flints from the Mesolithic and the Neolithic are found there as well, and even artifacts from the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, which is important. But what's even more interesting is that this goes up to the Roman era as well, where they're starting to find more evidence, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. But online, it just seems like it doesn't have that much love and attention, which is a shame, because this is something that's fantastic. This is near woods, is called the Lord's Woods, and it is definitely something that's really magical as well. So something to actually further look out at.
Yeah, I think in a way we were always told that that's where people lived. You know, that's where they settled in the Highlands and in the mountains, and it was really Neolithic or Mesolithic people who got rid of all the trees. Because it would have been full of trees, you know, but they did live there. But then the Ice Age, I can't remember now. Did it get colder? It got really cold, so that's why they started coming down. So it's almost like a voyage, you know. We're going back in a way, you know. We're going really right back to where it all kind of started.
Yeah,
you know, in our Welsh world.
yeah, but I agree, Anne. And I think that Wales is so promising with so many things. And even the one last thing that I'll show you here on this in this presentation, I think again it just shows you how promising the archaeology is here as well. And I think in discussion with the caves, I think that they could be something that could have been possibly used to actually hide away and possibly eat. You're quite vulnerable when you're eating, and you don't want to be attacked while you're eating, so maybe being hidden away while you eat is probably best, and that's why you see all the flint and the bones there, and maybe we resided in something else. And I think we'll never truly know, but I love looking at the theories that we have on all of this as well. So I think what we'll also look at is this next one here, which is Brannig 51. So 4,000 years ago, a community living. Hang on, let me just see if I can get my right notes up. It's coming up with something a lot more later than that, and that's not what I want. Yes, there's a great thing online called the Megalithic Portal. If you're interested in anything prehistoric, then they put a lot of people's photos and even discussions. And this is one of the things on here. It's a shame that it doesn't get attention in terms of Wikipedia, but you do see quite a few niche things that have brought this up. But this is 4,000 years ago, and this was a community that was living in the valleys below the Denbigh Moors. And this is fantastic because we're finding this circular platform of level stones, tower, and below a towering totem pole here. And this was significant. This was really honouring the two individuals that they found here, which is an adult and a child. But this is absolutely fantastic because it has 26 small stones in a perfect circle with 7 metre wide flat cairn ring around, with raised a couple of feet above ground. And this has a magnificent view as well. And a lot of people have said this is one of the most unusual cairns they've seen to this day. And I think, again, this is why we see how Welsh archaeology is so important, is because of how unique it is. And this is absolutely fantastic. And one thing that they found was that the bodies were cremated and they were placed into a pot. So this is this sense of a ritual in saying goodbye to your loved ones, a way of remembering them and giving them the honour. But they were buried with a bone-handled dagger as well. And this could have meant something in terms of maybe what they did in society. Maybe that's how they were a hunter, and maybe that's what they used to kill people. Maybe that was something that was meant to protect them to the afterlife. So they were fighting against anything that could kill them before they went to the afterlife. And maybe this could have had a much deeper meaning. But this was reconstructed in the 1970s, and this sacred cairn, because when you go there, it looks like it would be very sacred, and to even see the water and the hills and just the landscape around it, you would get this sense of it's almost like everything's peaceful and quiet, and you feel a connection with the past there. So yes, I think is a great way to describe it as a sacred cairn. But it's one of the unusual bronze sites in Bronze Age sites in Britain, and again highlighting how unique Welsh archaeology and history is, and how we need to focus on it more to actually bring more of a discussion of this rather than a few little things found on a blog, which is really sad to actually see. But a lot of people have discussed this as well. Just for example, this blog, someone talks about how the sunlight looks lovely when they're there in the middle on a February afternoon. Another person talks about how that, again, it's always the sun rises, but a lot of people admiring the landscape. And I think if people are admiring the landscape back then, imagine what it would like. If people are admiring the landscape now, imagine what it would have been like back then. And maybe this would have been a great way to honour an individual in the community. And maybe this was something that a lot of people felt like they invested the most time to and wanted to remember them in some sort of way. So I thought that was quite interesting to actually look at, and hopefully see if anyone has sparked any interest in this in the future, and maybe hopefully we've encouraged more people to actually go and explore Wales themselves. So if I go on to the next one, so St Liffin's burial chamber. Right, I think one thing that I've got to pick a bone at with this map that I had that talks about the paranormal and the magical in the whole of Britain and in Wales is that they put St Liffin's burial chamber near Swansea, and it's really annoyed me because I know it's not in Swansea, but I was just thinking, what if there's people that don't know it's in Swansea, and that it's not in Swansea, and that is near quite near Cardiff, really. This is something that I love. There is a photo of me somewhere standing in the middle of this monument, and I will possibly try and find it when we finish, because I believe I have put it on my history page. But it's definitely a fantastic site, and definitely one, when you go there, it just feels absolutely magical. As you can see, there's a sun poking through there, and there's a lot of discussions about this as well, because a little is very known, and I think is very similar to the layer of the Greyhound Bitch, or the King Arthur's table, for example, but this would have been covered with a mound that's no longer there, and the capstone is huge, is about 40 ton, I believe, and this is not far from Tinkinswood's burial chamber as well, and this is a 6,000-year-old burial chamber, and this is 1,000 years older than Stonehenge itself. Unlike Tinkinswood, though, St. Liffen's is smaller, so actually Tinkinswood weighs 40 ton. This one weighs about 35 tons, and it's thought that erosion means that it would have weighed a lot less, especially the same as the other one. This is a Neolithic burial chamber, and is known as the House of the Rising Sun, if you go to the board nearby. And like I said, the sun hitting it from the back, you can definitely see it. And this mound would have been about 12 meters wide with 30 meters long, and it would have been impressive. And it lacks the grand size, the size that we see with Tinkinswood, but it's definitely still impressive. And it's known as a megalith, and it would have been very significant to the Neolithic builders, and possibly the beliefs of those who've passed, and those who are living as well. I think it was a way to connect with those in the past. And a lot of people talk about how, again, there's different discussions. This Greyhound Bitch discussion for it is coming to play with this burial chamber as well. So again, you see with these Arthurian legends, they are connected with more than one site. So the Arthur's Table one has the same story as this one, but this one, it doesn't seem to be that widely known with the other one. But I think it's this Arthurian romance that's been applied to this, really, that we see all of this. But it's also local legends have come into play with this, where if you have wishes that are whispered into the chamber on Halloween evening, it will be granted. And if you stood in an accursed field on the Midsummer's Eve, the capstone is said to spin 3 times, and the 3 stones go in the nearby river to wash themselves. There's a lot of this idea of magical stones moving, really, I think, with Wales, and I think possibly this is why there's a significance on the blue stones in Priscilla, because maybe these blue stones are seen as magical, and it seems like that magical stones seem to come from Wales, and I think this is something that they possibly would have liked in the past as well. Not saying that they possibly would have had that belief, but it seems like it's something with us now. This one hasn't been properly excavated, and there was buried. Whether there was buried remains here is a mystery. However, in 1875, the chamber was excavated, and there was some pottery and some bones found. And in 2012, the surrounding area was excavated. But again, it's something that you don't get much attention to, which is quite frustrating. So if we move on to the next one. So this is something else that's quite significant to Welsh history, I believe. So if I can get this up here. This area in Goldcliff is quite important because we see a lot of things. This is located near Newport, and it's important to the study of our past because it dates to the Mesolithic area, and this would have been looking quite different. This is now an area, there's a tidal estuary, which is important in terms of looking at trade. But once this was covered in oak trees, there was no water, and there would have been this reed swamp that was there, so it could have been more accessible to certain parts that we can't get to now. But they found footprints of humans here, reindeers, ralds, crane, and this was hidden under the silty mud and was given the date of 6,000 years ago. And this is a snapshot into what our landscape was like with what animals we were living with, and what we were walking by the side. So Martin Wade is an individual that investigated these footprints, but he said this was a fantastic glimpse of the past. Again, he said this is definitely something that we're seeing where is this beginning of settled farming around about 5,050 years ago. This was just before that, and the start of it. And this is definitely fantastic because you're seeing how this is really an area that we felt connected to for many years, and it's yielded lots of finds from different time periods in the prehistoric period. There's even tools that have been found alongside these fossils that give us an idea of prehistoric life and the animals that were there. Bones and teeth of long dead creatures have turned up, and they've been dissolved to be replaced by hard mineral. These footprints are important because they're actual prints of actual people who trod on our piece of earth hundreds and thousands of years ago. And Kristen Barr is a doctoral research student at the University of Reading. And she talked about the footprints. She said that they were first discovered in 1986 by a local man, and he brought this to the attention of archaeologists. And this is now being monitored and surveyed by the University of Reading. This area is showing that it's rich in the finds we have of our distant past, and how the Severn Estuary is important for the archaeological sites of the prehistoric period. Definitely seeing a lot of skeletal remains of pigs and deers and horses, and human skulls being found there as well, which also finds the Bronze Age period, which we see with buildings at Redwick, as well as Bronze Age spearheads are found from Porton. But we see that there's Mesolithic flints being found here, and definitely a promising area for the archaeology of this period. But it's a snapshot of the prehistory and how we're even able to find more of things 40,000 years ago. And this is dating up to around about 3,500 years ago. But these footprints of mammals and humans and birds were proven to be the most significant finds of the area. And definitely this very important. And I think what we find as well is that there's lots of bird footprints that we're finding, and a third of them were crane species as well. And they even found that there was about 200 footprints, human footprints that was found there as well in the Gold Cliff area. So definitely something that's very interesting, and it'd be interesting to see if more is being found. But they said that these footprints are normally overlooked, but we can humanize them to a story. And we saw that there was a group of children being found in these footprints. And children are often hidden members of prehistoric societies. And rather than letting them be invisible to the archaeological record, these footprints can reveal more about them. These footprints that we see at Gold Cliff are dominated by those children with experimental work with modern children, showing that some of them were as young as 2 or 3. And I think that's fantastic how we're able to find out so much more than just man, but young man as well. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. But a lot of people think that there's evidence of temporary campsites being found here. And definitely this was a site that would have been prime hunting grounds from the footprints of all the fantastic animals that would have been there as well. Let me just see how many we've got left. Yes, we're on the track, so I'll quickly go through all these so we can quickly look at the last one. But this is another one that does have attention online, but it's fantastic. It's meant to mean the hill in the dark grove, and this is something that's in Anglesey. Anglesey, I think, has got some fantastic history. This is dating back to 3000 BC, which this is a stone circle that would within its banks itself would have been a replacement for an even earlier wood circle. And it's almost where we have this discussion where Carl talks about a wood hen, which is almost like they get upgraded in some sort of sense to stone, some of them, and this is what we see with this one. And inside the stone, inside the tomb is a stone pillar the size of a fully grown person, which is resembling a petrified tree trunk. And this is thought to be formed under immense pressure as well. But this is definitely an interesting landmark, and this would have had a bank and a ditch as well, so clearly protecting something inside, possibly an important individual here, or maybe something that they would have put a family in. Maybe this was meant to speak something, but this would have been the early Neolithic period as well. This would have had a long, narrow passage that led to an octagon chamber, and there was artifacts such as human bones and arrowheads and carved stones that have been found there. The carved stones is quite interesting. Are they gods or goddesses? Is this something to do with beliefs, or are they resembling the individuals that have been buried there, almost like a way for them to go off into the afterlife? But I think that this is something that holds a very unusual feature that you can only see once a year. As the sun rises on the summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year, shafts of light shine directly through the tomb's passageway to illuminate the chamber within, which I think that's fantastic. It's almost like it would light it up. And this is something that's been talked about in the found pillars that are freestanding inside, like Brittany, in Brittany, but is interpreted as maybe a guardian or even a protector of this tomb, and protect those who have been buried inside. So again, maybe something that's an important individual. Definitely something that's fantastic here as well. And the archaeology, I think I would like to look at this in a deeper lens next time, because there's even cup marks in there as well. And to me, this would suggest that this was a group of individuals, and the cup marks are then leaving their mark behind for them to remember them. But between 2015 and 2020, this is engaged in studies of the wider landscape. We see how Manchester Metropolitan University and CADU have worked on this, and how they've involved the local community in the investigation. So I think this would definitely be interesting to look at, because it shows this study of known ancient rock art on a near outcrop as well. But again, this rock art is the cut marks, but it's definitely an interesting one to look at, and something that you can really appreciate. And lastly, I just wanted to look at this because this is the one that's been having calls to be brought back to Wales. A lot of people think that it shouldn't be in the British Museum. It needs to come back to Wales so we can take more pride for it. And I know this was exhibited at the National Museum of Cardiff and Wrexham County Borough Museum, July to September 2013. And it's definitely a fantastic find, something that's really interesting to look at. And a lot of people have discussed on how it was worn, on whether it was going over someone and so right up and down to their elbows, but a lot of people think that would have been impractical. Some people think that maybe it was put around the torso and then their arms would have gone over it. There's lots of ways of people finding this out, but maybe this was ceremonial. One of the images shows a girl wearing it, and obviously it goes down to her elbows, and is covering her shoulders, so the tops of her arms. And I like that way of looking at it. It looks like maybe it was ceremonial, maybe a show of status. But this is absolutely fantastic, because it's one of the finest examples of prehistoric sheet gold working, and it's quite unique in its form and design. And I do feel like Carl might have more to say about this, and possibly in our lectures that we have on a Thursday, but it's absolutely fantastic because it's been beaten out of a single ingot of gold. This is really skilled metal work in here, and I think this is something that really needs to be discussed more with it. So it was found in the Wrexham area, and it was found the Flintshire find of 1833. So the cape was discovered in October 1833 at Bryn Elion, which is in the outskirts of Mold, Flintshire. And while workmen were employed to filling in a gravel pit on the side of the road, they uncovered this crushed gold object at the side of the stony bank. And there's even reconstructions of them finding it, and it's shining. And they're in shock. They're like, what's this? And they have the skeleton there. This gold cape was found in a stone-lined grave around the poorly preserved remains of a human skeleton. And again, this is saying a lot about the individual. That this is something that's finally made, and definitely would say something about them. But many amber beads were found laid out in rows upon the cape, and there was tantalizing pieces of woven cloth, possibly attached to the cape, was also seen, but these did not survive. And you see how this is discussed in the Archaeologia in 1834. But this burial was a tumulus or a cairn of stones, and this monument was about 28 meters in diameter. It was quite large. And it was gathering, it was requiring a considerable gathering of labour to build. And news and circumstances of discovery were made more widely known through the care and efforts of Reverend Charles Butler Clough, which was a vicar of the local area, and he reported his report formed an important part of the published article of the find. But the finds became separated, they became lost, and the main fragments of the sheet of gold were acquired by the British Museum in 1836. Additional surviving finds, which were associated with the burials, include a part of a bronze knife, a bronze strap back in strips, and a single amber bead. So all those amber beads was described to have been found. A majority have been lost, and we only have one left, which is really a shame. And it does make you angry how this is a very significant find for Welsh archaeology and history, and it's been treated like this. But it's still a fantastic one. And many rich folklore associations with this place of a golden spectre, a man of this gigantic size, has been sighted standing on the grave. In others is this apparition of a boy dressed in gold, which is seen close to the mount as well. So a lot of people have got a lot of supernatural stories about the individual this belonged to. So a lot of people think, well, maybe was this like a corselet, or was it like a cape? How do we wear that? And that was definitely a discussion. There's even a discussion about the maker and the wearer. What does this say about them? We'll never know who made the cape, but we can say that the maker was very skilled. He was a very skilled craftsperson that really knew how to work with gold. But the cape is believed to be made in the early Bronze Age. Some fragments of the sheet of gold from the grave did not belong to the restored cape. So these fragments were of a simpler design, and is thought to be a second cape that would have been buried within the grave. And a late 17th century record suggests that another possible cape could have been discovered nearby. But none of the bones that were discovered survived, and the objects in the grave, like the capes and the amber bead necklace and the bronze fragment knife, suggested that the cape was worn by a woman of distinction here. So a lot of people have discussed on whether this could be a female, and I again, just the design of it, I feel like it would have been. But we definitely see how this has brought this attention here as well, to a lot more other capes and other things to find in the site. And they even talk about how this cape was used with around about 700 grams of gold, which was making it the heaviest early Bronze Age gold object in Britain. And analysis of this shows that the gold has a high silver content, which is a naturally occurring signature. So gathering this amount of gold would have been both an achievement and a power statement to those around them. And this rich and new neighbouring gold source may have been accessed during this time. So research is starting to pinpoint the exact location where they're finding this gold ore deposit in mid and North Wales. So a lot of people have thought that maybe gold and tin from Cornwall or gold from West Wales, and they were finding, but it seems like there's this trade as well as being moved on. They've even found that there's possible gold sources right up into North Wales, and some in Mid Wales, and some then in Pembroke as well, which is quite interesting to look at this. But they think that this was possibly shown to be possibly mined, copper mined at the Great Ormond in Anglesey, and in Mid Wales also passed through this region. So there's mines being fed bronze casting here as well in workshops in Britain, which were essential for the prized weapons and tools that we see as well. But we definitely see how there's this ceremonial elite in North East Wales. This is an area that's quite strategic because we're benefiting from the movements of copper and gold through ancestral land, and so they're able to show off their wealth in that sense as well. So one last thing that I wanted to mention is this was just something that I wanted to put in there because I just thought it was quite unusual. This is something that I pass quite often when I'm in the car with my boyfriend or my stepdad, and I always thought, because this is in quite a posh area and all the houses are quite unusual, some of them look quite old looking, some of them have built a tower. There is a story behind it that when people were allowed to build houses there, it was this competition on who could have the most extravagant and weird looking one, and this is where all the money is in this area, and this is something that I've noticed. I generally thought it was someone having a really wacky design on a house, and it is now been used as a house, and the individual's really showing this off with great pride and love, and on the bottom floor is windows now, and you can see this weird sculpture in it. But I just thought it was quite interesting because we have a lot of these around in Cardiff, but this is the King Coyd Water Tower. And this was from 1898, and you can see the red brick tower here as well, and how its purpose was a pumping station for the covered reservoir, which was adjacent, which has now been removed. This is just fantastic, and it's nice that it's being loved and taken care of by someone who lives there as well, because they really didn't want to change or compromise the original structure. So a quirky way of someone showing off, I think, archaeology or any history, because this is architectural history and it might not be as old as we like. I think is still fantastic to look at. So I just wanted to quickly look at that because it is grade 2 listed now, and this is again, this is a family dwelling now, so it's absolutely fantastic. So I just want to say that Wales has so much to offer. They have unique ways of presenting the archaeology and history through myths and legends. They have unique ways of changing it, so the purpose is still is changing, but is still important to society. And I think looking at Welsh archaeology and history is vital to look at before any of the archaeology is lost, and to even just look at archives. The archives is so full with things we haven't actually discussed. And a lot is going on in Wales in the prehistoric period, and we see this still skilled craftsmanship and idea of trade and how we show off power in such fantastic ways. And I think Wales has just got a great pride in showing off its archaeology and history, and the petition to get the mould cape back to Wales shows that people really want to take pride of Welsh archaeology and history in Wales, and educate people around them, because this mould cape had a very sad story, that so much has been lost from it, and I think Wales just wants to take it back for itself and look after it the way that they want to. But we're seeing how there's a new generation of academics in Wales that is bringing a main focus to the study of Wales for this reason, and they want to give it as much love and attention that it deserves. So if I stop sharing now, so I'll ask everyone if there's any questions, Anne.
Oh, it was interesting you mentioned St. Lythans, because we went to see it, we went to see the dig, and we always wondered what would come of it,
Yeah.
Not much.
No, which is a shame, really.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's a nice, you've done a nice talk around Wales, to see. There's a taster for the prehistoric remains we've got, and how interesting it is, and like you say, there's the prehistory, and then you've got the site, which is sort of become food for spiritual and magic and legends, but it's still relevant, even today. But so long as they realise that it was built a long time before King Arthur.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people forget that because it's so wrapped up in the history, but also the magic that comes with the history. And I think that's the problem. Sometimes people need to just say, listen, I can't get too wrapped up into it. Let's look at it from a very rational and historical perspective. Definitely some unique history here in Wales, and something to really be proud of, I think. And it'd be interesting to see what comes out of it in our Thursday lectures, because there was so much I wanted to talk about that I know that we'll be talking about. So I thought I'd better hold back. But thank you, Anne. Pat, anything from you?
Just that it's really interesting. I have a soft spot for all the ancient monuments, very much so. So yeah.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. And hopefully we see you in person soon. I think everyone's missing you.
Yeah, we are, Pat.
I got to get my husband healthy.
Oh, bless.
Off his crutches.
How is he?
Pretty good, he's getting around, but he's not walking the dogs yet. So.
Takes a lot out to do.
Yeah, the rest up, and you try and have some rest as well, Pat, when you can. Sneak a cup of tea or something. But thank you both. I'll see you tomorrow, Anne, and I'll see you next week, Pat. And take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
We can always do a Tuesday, Pat.
Oh, she's disappeared.
Oh, she disappeared. It's okay. I'll tell her again. Bye then.
All right. Take care, Anne.
Yeah, bye.
Anyone that's watching on YouTube, again, give this account a follow and a like. It is really appreciated. And if you think that Welsh archaeology and history should be given the attention, then you definitely should be giving us some likes and follows, so we can get out there to more people and really spark our interest in just the public and even young academics to be. So thank you, everyone, and good night.